I'm Aisha Adams Powell, and today I will be discussing researcher positionality. This is a brief overview of my presentation. I will start with an introduction, discuss what researcher positionality is and how it affects the PI process, explain solution neutrality and how that is impacted by our positionality and the way that it impacts our research, and then reflections and formative evaluations right before our conclusion. The three major questions that will be covered throughout this presentation are what is researcher positionality? How does researcher positionality relate to remaining solution neutral? And how does this relate to reflections and formative evaluations? I'd like to start with explaining what reflexivity is. It is covered within several of the articles that I have read for our module 9, and it's basically the layers of identity and your self-awareness. So as a researcher, you have to acknowledge your positionality, your personal experiences, and any conscious or unconscious biases that you may have before going into your research. When reading the article The Elite Delusion, Reflexivity, Identity, and Positionality in Qualitative Research by Mason Bish, I did find it interesting that there's an actual name for um, essentially psyching yourself out before actually interacting with participants. So she describes it as people of status who aren't exactly accessible. So an issue with that is that they may not want to be interviewed, or they may avoid providing transparent responses if they do interview. And that can be a little bit difficult as a researcher. So making sure that you maintain the power dynamic and ensure that you don't get so caught up in their status and the power that they hold, whether they're an expert in the area or whether they're the gatekeeper that determines anybody's fate that's related to your topic. Not getting psyched out by that, because you are the researcher, you're the expert, this is your study. So to help with that, being mindful of your preparation for interviews, making sure that your questions are aligned with who you're interacting with, and understanding that your positionality does affect the outcomes of your research. Reflections and self assessments are really closely related to reflexivity. So I'm not going to go too deep into the self assessment part, but making sure that we're aware of our preconceived notions, any seen, unseen, and unforeseen biases that we may have. Milner has a really good article that's called Race, Culture, and Researcher Positionality, Working Through Danger Seen, Unseen, and Unforeseen. He does a really good job of explaining ways to avoid bias and misinterpretation of your findings within your work, and reiterating the fact that your identity and your experiences do affect data. So whether you're on the inside or the outside of whatever your topic is that you're researching, that intersectionality does matter. So you do have to examine your social situation, be mindful of your preconceived notions, and be transparent with yourself and those that you are participating in this study with, to make sure that your credibility and rigor is still there. The next thing is formative evaluation. So if you notice in the word formative, it starts with form. This is going to be before actually implementing the intervention. And Hastings does describe the process. Basically, for formative evaluations, you are collecting your data, you're analyzing your data, and preparing to communicate, pilot, launch, and monitor or modify your intervention. So when you're doing this formatively, you can go back, you can make adjustments and change things. To remain solution neutral, you do have to make sure that before you go in and choose an intervention, you have to conduct research. So intervention comes after investigation. So you want to make sure that your inquiry is based on evidence, actual facts that can be documented. Um, Make sure that you understand what the underlying causes are. Are they internal? Are they external? Is it on an organization level? Is it process level? Or is it an individual level? I like to leave you with this quote by one of my favorite writers. There are years that have questions and years that answer. As researchers, as professionals, evidence-based inquiry is our norm, and everything involves us asking questions. When we go into any research that we conduct, we have to have questions that guide what we're doing, and we have the course of 3 years to answer our research questions and have our big beautiful dissertations in practice. So within our 3 years, hopefully we'll all have the answers to our questions that we decided to conduct research about, and do some action research. These are my sources, and thank you so much for listening.